Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel where each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. If it doesn't go round, I don't like to do it. This week we're going to be doing two bowls that are sitting over here on the bench, and they come off of my top shelf. A lot of people have been wondering if I was ever going to get to these bowls. So since we got a move coming up, I want to try and clean off as much of that as I can. So that's going to be this video. We're going to be working on a spalted maple piece, and we're also going to be working on a black walnut bowl that's, well, it's got some condition issues. So we're going to fix those up. And so that's this video. Anyway, let's move over to the casting bench and I'll show you what I want to do with these pieces, and we'll go from there. All right, so here's the two bowls. Now, I don't think that there's a whole lot to do to this one. I think that it's a fairly solid casting, or not a casting, bowl blank. Yeah, I mean, it's spalted maple, and I think what I'm going to do with this piece, once we've got it trimmed up, is burn the rim on it to give it some nice contrast. So between that and the spalting, it should look pretty neat. Now you can see that I've got a glue block on here already, and this has been on here for a long time. And I have concerns, and I'm talking like maybe a couple of years. So this could be a problem. It may come off the bottom of this with, it doesn't freeze in my workshop in the wintertime, but it gets pretty cold out here. And that constant cold, hot in the wintertime sometimes will work this loose. So we'll throw this on the lathe and then give it a good smack to make sure that it's not going to come off. This one here, the story behind this is that we've got a really big split. Back up this. Really big split there. And there's also a long split here. And what this was, a customer wanted a large bowl. And I mean, this is a really decent sized salad bowl, so it's a shame to lose it. It's almost 13.5 inches. And you know, you're looking at probably 6 inches overall. So it's in my best interest to repair this because black walnut is not cheap. So we'll be doing something with there, and of course this crack in here. So first things first, let's go over to the lathe. We'll throw this on and then see if this is going to stay. And then if it isn't, then we may have to knock it off and then re-glue this on here. These are my homemade face plates, and very simple thing to do. All you have to do is find the nuts that will fit your lathe. This is, I think, 3/16. Yes, it's a 3/16 inch plate steel. I just used a hole saw to cut out the outside profile, and then I cut out the center on this and then weld them together. And then once you've got all your holes drilled for your face plates, they're very cheap and easy to make. I've got about 25 of these actually. Anyway, let's go to the lathe. So the other thing that I'll talk about is this little adapter that I had made. If the camera decides to focus, there it is. Now, my old lathe, the threads were 1 inch, 8 threads per inch, and I had a bunch of those face plates already made. And when I got my new lathe, it's got a larger spindle on it. So then I just went to a machine shop. They milled out the threads for this lathe, which I can't remember what they are now, maybe 1 inch and 1/8, something like that. And that way, on the outboard end of my lathe, I typically only do finish turning, so you don't need really large, heavy-duty spindles for that. So that allowed me to just keep my existing face plates that I had, and I didn't have to make new ones, because the larger the nut that you're looking for, it's going to be a lot harder to find. So it's maybe in your best interest to go to a machine shop, have them make something like this, and then you can find, you know, regular size nuts you might even be able to find at a hardware store instead of a specialty nut and bolt store like Fastenal. Places like that. I just put it on, Again, these are left-hand threads on the outboard end. Lock it on. That's not going anywhere. Yeah. Well, there's your answer. Yeah, so make sure if you've had these waste blocks sitting on your pieces for a long time, make sure you have a real good look at them before you actually throw them on the lathe and do anything. All right, I'll turn on my electric frying pan and get the glue warmed up, and we'll get this glue back on. All right, so I just want to check this one, make sure it's not an issue. It shouldn't be, because I did this one, I'm going to say probably 6 months ago, so yeah, that's good. That's not going anywhere. But it just goes to show you, like these are twice turned bowls that have been through a kiln, and this one's been trimmed already, and that's when I found these little cracks in it, and that's why I kind of put it on the back burner till now. But look at the movement in it even since then. And probably a lot to do with that is the fact that you've got all that tension in the wood, so when it comes out of the kiln, you know, it's kind of bound tightly. And then you trim it away and the wood starts to relax, because as wood dries, it actually is pretty stressful on wood. So anyway, it will relax, and this is what you'll get. I know sometimes a lot of new turners, they'll say, well, how come my bowls are moving after I've done them? And a lot of times that's the case. It's really nothing more than that. Could be the fact that it isn't dry. These are bone dry. They were less than 7%, and they're, like I said, they're in my fridge kiln. So, which I did do a video on. If you want to check that out, I will, if I can remember, I'll link it in the description down below. If you want to make a reasonably cheap kiln that actually works quite well using a fridge. So what I think I'll do with this is I will trim this up so it's running nice and true before we do any work on this. The other thing too is, you know, this in-grain staining, I don't know how deep that goes, but probably not too bad. I do find that when you trim pieces with a gouge, that it doesn't really open the pores of the wood. However, if you were to sand this with, say, 60 grit, well, then you really open the pores of the wood. So when you put that thin CA glue on, or even epoxy, it's going to wick right into the wood, and then you're in trouble as far as in-grain staining is concerned. But anyway, let's get this one trimmed up while we're waiting for the glue to warm up, and see what we're looking at after that. So getting right into this, I'm going to use the 5/8 bowl gouge by David Ellsworth to just trim this up and true it up. Make sure that's running nice, and we'll make sure to get rid of that staining. It's not really that big of a deal though, because I'm going to be cutting that area out anyway. But I thought I would just leave that in there to kind of show you how deep the staining goes with the CA glue. But like I said, with the gouge, it's not going to go in very deeply, but hey, you put any sandpaper to this, you're definitely going to get some sort of staining that's going to be hard to remove. And there you can see it's gone. Now I certainly could have left this bowl the way it was and not even worry about this, but you know, it's too thick at this point. And you know, the thicker this is, and if it's not running true, then of course it's going to be a lot harder to trim up after the epoxy goes in to hold the inlay that we're going to be using this week. So, you know, it's in your best interest to turn things not to the finished dimension, that's for sure, but I'll say 1/4 inch from what the finished thickness is going to be, and then hopefully you won't have any issues after that. So when I initially put this on, I thought that I might be able to delete that long crack that's on the side of this. So that's what I'm doing. You know, at some point you have to call it and say, okay, we're not going to be able to go any further than this because we're starting to get too thin. And keep in mind that you need some thickness there to hold this inlay. So that's important too. But anyway, it's always worth your while to try and delete that crack before you have to do any other work on it. All right, so this crack is getting harder and harder to see, so I'm just going to use a pencil here to mark it because I don't even think the camera can pick it up. There it is there. Now what I was trying to do was thin this out, of course, so that try and delete this, but by the time it does get deleted, it's probably going to be too thin for my liking. So we're going to have to deal with the one in the end grain and this one here, and I think I've seen another one here somewhere. I'll have a quick look before I take this off. Where did I see that? Yeah, I think it's all part of that one crack that goes along there. Something like that. So it goes from here to essentially there. So that's a fairly decent fix. All right, so when you're getting ready to cut out these cracks, you know, I don't just thin these out a little bit and then fill them. I know that some people do, I don't. I prefer to actually make kind of a feature of it. So if you haven't been here before, this is typically what I like to do with these. And I don't know, something like this. We can always fine tune this afterwards too. Give it a little bit of flair. Something like that. And the other thing too is when you're looking at this crack on the outside, it's always deeper on the inside just because of the shape of the bowl. So that should be okay, close to it. Now this one on the inside, that's a whole different other story. Yeah, what I might be doing is cutting out this entire section. That is what I might be doing here. There are some little wormholes in this piece. This is the reason why this is a different color. For those who don't know, this is the sapwood. The very outside of the tree has a white ring around it when it's growing, and that's called sapwood. I really don't want to, but I may have to. Yeah, that's the section that needs to be cut out. If we're going to do that, which I'm not sure of right now, because that is a lot of inlay, but we'll probably use some resin here, so yeah, I guess we will. There, that should do it. So we're going to have we're going to use some branches in here. Don't know exactly what we're going to use yet, but all right, let's cut these out. Whew. I think I need a little coarser blade on it than that, but I don't think I have. Just let me check. The Sawzall will be a lot faster. So if you use this method, be careful because you can remove a lot of material pretty fast. It's a pretty aggressive blade I got on there. I didn't really have any fine blades. Sometimes I've used metal blades that seem to not be as aggressive, but I figured I wouldn't bother changing it this time around. Well, it ain't pretty, but what do you expect from a demo saw? So that is a Typhoon bit. You can get those at Lee Valley here in Canada, and they do ship to the US. I believe there is a link in the description for this one, actually. So, you know, after we get this roughly cut, then, you know, we got to clean it up because, you know, if you just left this kind of the way it is, it would kind of look terrible from the side. So I really like to use bits like this to smooth things out so it looks really nice. If I had to do if I could redo this, I would probably not make the bottom of that look so flat. It's a little flat for my liking. Would have had a little bit more of a dip into it. And another concern is you should always try to make sure that when you're grinding this wood back, that when the branches are sitting in there, they're sitting parallel to the wood, so it's not kind of rocking back and forth and facing upward or facing downwards. Nice and flat is what you're looking for. All right, so off camera, I cut up a whole bunch of little stabilized purple sand cherry branches. Got a whole bucket full here. And, we're just going to lay these in. And I thought what might be fun is I've got a bunch of little globes like this. Well, they're halves, and I glued them together. And I've got 3 of them. And possibly what I might do is stick 2 in this inlay here somewhere and 1 here. That way, just adds a little bit of whimsy, if you will. All right, so we're going to lay these branches in, and when we do that, we're going to use some accelerator and some Starbond thin, and that way the branches will be held in place. We'll be able to grind these back and then put our plastic on. So that's what I'm doing. So there's no rhyme and reason to this, it's all personal choice. However you want to lay these in here, large, small, a mix of different sizes, it's all up to you. You will see though, it at times can be frustrating. Now these are about 1.25 inches long-ish, somewhere around there. And it is very important that you keep these branches so that at least they're on the outside plane of this. Sometimes it can be kind of tricky to lay these in here and get them done right. So to do this type of inlay, it is ideal to use stabilized branches. And if you happen to use branches that happen to have some moisture in them, once they get into a dry environment, then of course the branches are going to shrink and then they potentially can fall out. And I've been, this has happened to me a couple of times. I think it happens to anybody that does this kind of work. I've used branches that I thought were dry, but in the end ended up being an issue. But, having that, when I first cut the area for this to lay in, you can see how the branches are tilted forward. Ideally, they'd be just sitting nice and parallel and they're, horizontal to the wood. And, it's just easier to lay them in and they have a tendency not to fall out as much. But you can definitely see that, I think that the thin CA glue is the best option for this. Yeah, you could use maybe UV resin, but the CA glue with the accelerator is far faster and it's my preferred method. Well, there's one. I mean, it's going to give us a look that we've never seen before. So that's the idea. So when I was doing juried art shows and running the roads here, I would do about 20 to 25 inlaid bowls a week. And of course, all would be various. Some would be worse than others. Some would have no cracking at all, but I would do inlays in the rims anyway. But what I would typically do is go out and get 20 to 25 of these bowls, bring them in, clean the bottoms off, put the face plates on, and then trim all of them. And that exposes any major flaws that need to be fixed. And that, again, will also let that wood relax. And then when it goes back on the lathe, then, things will run truer. But fixing major flaws like this would be my first priority. And they're, later in the week, then, the work would get easier because you weren't fixing these major flaws. Still curing. All right, so what I'm going to do, because I need to do it over here, but I'm just going to saturate this with the glue, and then again use the accelerator, and then we're going to go over to the lathe and trim these off so they're flush with the outside anyway. For those who are interested in trying some Starbond, I'll remind you that there is a link in the description to get 15% off your next order when you use code InlayJim at checkout. You know, I'll give that about, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and then we'll be back on the lathe. All right, so what we're going to do this time is we're going to use the cut-saw sander here, and we're going to grind this back into the surface of the walnut. Now, you don't definitely want to go too deep into this, and it's a lot harder to even do on the inside. So typically when I'm inlaying these branches, I'll make sure that on the inside of the bowl, it's more flusher than it is on the outside, because the outside is quite easy to grind away. But when you're trying to do this on the inside, it can be quite a chore. You'll see it here in a second. But, you know, it's a lot harder to do, and sometimes you might even grind a little bit of the bowl away on the inside. So it's always best to try and leave the majority of the grinding on the outside of the bowl where you have easy access. And that way you don't put great big cut marks in your bowl, because this thing is aggressive and it will do that in a hurry. So we are going to be using epoxy to hold this inlay in. And when I put this hot melt glue on, you can see that it's really close to where the inlay is. And the main reason for that is so that we don't get any epoxy staining in the wood. If you were to say, glue this on an inch below where the inlay area is, then when the epoxy goes in, you're going to get resin staining. That I can guarantee you. So to make sure that, you know, we're not going to have any leaks, I glued it on first and then double glued it and then put the duct tape over top of the glue. And, you know, this is a very secure method and it should not leak. But, you know, you have to be careful not to put so much hot melt glue on that it gets pushed into the inlay area, because if you don't happen to notice that, then you'll have to repair that after you've trimmed it away. You might be able to trim away enough where it isn't an issue, but it's always a best practice to try and put it as close as you can. But, you know, trying to keep it out of that little inlay area sometimes can be quite a chore. But I think that to prevent the resin staining, it's well worth the risk of doing it this way. And I know this may look like overkill, but, you know, I've had my fair share of epoxy leaks in the past, and I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have any more, that's for sure. I don't know if that leaks. I don't know what to say. Last thing that I need to do is just build up some dams on the inside here with glue. That way when the resin goes in, you know, I want a little bit of a reservoir sitting on the top. So that's why I need to do that. This is extremely tall. I don't need this much, but yeah, it's interference. I'm just going to put this on the lathe and cut this off and bring it back. All right, well, there you go. Yeah, a little bit of fabrication, that's for sure. Anyway, I'm pretty confident this won't leak. I shouldn't say that, but anyway, let's mix up some resin. This week we're going to be using ArtCast from Designer Epoxy. This is a perfect epoxy if you're looking for color separation. We weren't doing that this week, but it is ideal for that. And of course, since I really like blues, we're going to stick some Caribbean blue in this. Along with the color of the walnut and the branches, I think it's a good match. All right, well, this is a little over 500 milliliters. I have no idea if this is going to be enough or not, but guess we'll find out. I do find that, you know, if I'm going to mix up epoxy, I generally will mix up more than I need. A lot of times it's very hard to match the color. So that's kind of my, you know, my idea behind that. And of course it can always be thrown into something else later on, so you don't waste it. Well, just so you know, that took 250 milliliters. So I'll throw the rest of this into my cups that I have. And this will go into the pressure pot overnight, and we'll see you guys in there tomorrow. Well, all right, it is the next day. No leaks. Well, maybe a very small one, but Nothing on the inside. It all looks nice. I will say you can't set this down on its own or else it wants to fall over. So that should be fun. But anyway, I'll get this on the lathe and we'll strip off all this tape and get to truing this piece up. Now there's been some questions in the past as to why I remove this prior to turning. And basically the answer to that is if you don't remove as much as you can, what will happen is it'll work loose and then it will slap the top of your hand. And I was already starting to feel some stuff, so that's why I went and got the glove on. So, you know, if you don't mind that being slapped off your knuckles, then go ahead. But I don't think too many people do. So that's why I try to remove as much of it as I can. I should mention that we are using the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems, another great sponsor. Thanks again to them for sponsoring my channel and giving discounts to the people that watch my videos. I really do appreciate it. If you've never talked or dealt with Mike Hunter on the phone, he's a great fellow. So I don't know if you caught the RPM earlier, but yeah, this is 255. That's about all I could do with this, or else it was just too much vibration. So, you know, that's another kind of curse when it comes to doing these inlay materials. If you're using soapstone, brass shavings, you know, really pretty much any other inlay that I've used other than branches, it will throw your project out of balance. If you've got two like on opposite sides of the bowls, and you know the bowl, then that's typically not that bad. But anytime that you've just got it predominantly on one side, until you can thin things out and get rid of some of that mass, then it's probably not going to be all that great of a turning experience. But once this thins out, I'm able to pick up the RPM. I think I actually pick it up here. Yeah, 750. So it didn't take long to get to 750, but just cutting that back and getting rid of some of that mass will really help with that. But until then, you may have to go pretty slow. And you know, I love it when I do an inlay and there's literally no filling to do. This is another thing that when you're working with natural materials like soapstone or alabaster, you know, materials like this, a lot of times it's hard to do unless you're using epoxy and it goes into the pressure pot, where you can eliminate all those little voids that are deep down inside of whatever inlay material you're using. So, you know, I'm finding that when it comes to, as far as holding inlays is concerned, I really do like using designer epoxies, art cast for that. You could probably use the Pro Series here too. There's not a huge amount of volume, but you know, the Pro Series is really only supposed to be about 3/16 of an inch max. But you know, you might be able to get away with it and not have any thermal cracking. But art cast is definitely the best resin for this. Right, I got my AC unit running in the background, so that you might be hearing that. There you go. I mean, got some tear out in this little branch, but I have to try and sand that out. I don't know, I might try and go back at it. But this, between these pieces and along here, the tear out was really, really bad. You can see a little bit there, but that will sand out easily. And what the problem is, of course, this is harder than the surrounding wood. So as this is spinning, the gouge kind of wants to bounce and not maintain contact. So, you know, I'm pushing on that gouge relatively hard to make sure it stays in contact with the tool rest. But, you know, not so hard that you can't slide it along. So hopefully you guys get what I'm saying there. These little windows, I would have liked to see that one a little bit larger, but, you know, we've got to go a little ways to get that the same, and then this one might be getting smaller. So kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit further I might be able to go. That one there is the right size, but again, if I keep going along here, then this may get smaller on the inside. But right now it's a good size on the outside and the inside. After sanding, these will be a little bit larger. Anyway, I'll just give this another quick rub down in here. Hopefully I can delete the tear out that's in that. And we'll start sanding. So I'm going to do some shear scraping, and I know that I've talked about this a fair bit in the last few videos. It's very important. You can actually see a little bit of resin staining or epoxy staining around the small inlay. And that's because I didn't get the glue right up tight. Not a worry. As we keep going here, it gets less and less, and I think after it's sanded, you don't even see it. So, but you know, that's something to pay close attention to when you're gluing the stuff on there. And yeah, there you go. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's sandable. Actually, it's more than sandable. It's actually quite good. So we're going to use the 3.5-inch nipple disc from sandpaper.ca. I've actually got some discs sent to me, and I'm going to try them here for them. And so I think that the 3.5-inch nipple disc will be back in stock here either now or shortly. But I decided to sand this piece. I think I went to 400 on it. Started at 60 and went to 400. There's no large resin epoxy pockets in here, so I don't see the need to go any higher than that because you're just wasting your time in sandpaper. All right, here's the best part. First coat of Waterlux gloss. So when I apply the finish on raw wood like I am here, the first coat is always on really heavy. I try to really cover the surface a lot. Yeah, I never need to wipe it off because it usually gets absorbed, and then of course I dial it back on the second and third coat after that. Okay, well I had a delivery, so I had to shut the camera off. Things are already starting to dry out in here. The crack, I didn't get it all, so there's a little right there and a little there, and I know that it's going to be virtually impossible to pick it up because they're pretty darn small, but they are there. A lot of times it's really hard to see these. I thought that I had gone far enough to get it all, but I didn't. But yeah, they're really, really fine. And what do you think about my little bling areas? I think it adds a lot of whimsy into it. I like it. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. But man, does that Waterlux ever bring that block walnut, the king of North American hardwoods, alive. Beautiful. This whole little sapwood area, just, I don't know, it adds a lot to it. You know, it's visually, I really like it. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. We'll put the second coat of finish on this tomorrow. Let's tackle the maple one. So since our glue block fell off, we'll have to reinstall that. And again, if you're new here, I have an electric frying pan that's full of hot melt glue, and I just stick the waste block into that and then stick it on the bottom of the bowls. I just eyeball it. my bowls that are twice turned are 1 inch thick for every 10 inches in diameter. So just by eyeballing it, I'm usually close enough that it's not a problem. So I know that some people have questioned about that as well. If you wanted to, you could pinch them between centers and clean things off and run circles on the bottom of them and line things up better. But yeah, there's a first indication of some compression grain there. Get some nice chatoyance out of that. And of course, some of that spalting is starting to come through as well. Now, I know that a lot of people struggle with these natural edge bowls. You can go from the base of the bowl up to the rim, but when you get to the rim, you have to really slow down, because if you don't, you're going to push off a bunch of material on that natural edge. So a lot of times I'll stop just kind of short there, and I won't actually go right off the very end when I'm doing these pull cuts like this. But when you're shear scraping, of course, it's not as aggressive, and then sometimes, you know, it can really help you with that. Still missing one little spot right there. So this is another way to it, you know, just basically the flutes of the gouge are facing straight up. And again, exiting the wood very, very slowly will be your friend here. Still got a little bit of tear out to deal with, so back at it again. I might even do some shear scraping on this after this. And you'll see a little bit of fuzz at the very top on the natural edge, and that's not to be concerned about, because that's going to be, you know, we're going to grind this down. Yeah, there it is right there. That's going to all disappear because we're going to have to grind this down to clean up that natural edge before we do anything else. So again, we're eventually going to pan out here, and you'll kind of see the way that I tackle the inside of these bowls with the gouge. Right there, you know, it's basically at 45 degrees as it enters the wood, and then once you've got a little place for the bevel to ride on, the shoulder for the bevel to ride on, then you're golden after that. In this zoomed out view, you can kind of see how the relationship of the gouge, how it enters the wood. I know that a lot of people are really hesitant to take on these natural edge bowls. They're very intimidated by them, and I get that. It is very hard to cut these natural edge bowls very clean at the very top part where the natural edge is. This one isn't too bad because, you know, it's more on the flatter side, but certainly in the past I've turned bowls with really deeper wings, and yeah, it can be challenging for sure. You'll see that my right hand is pretty close to that natural edge, and so you got to be really careful with that. And well, trust me, you'll only do that once, because it hurts if you get your hand too close to it, and you'll learn from that experience. All right, I've got you zoomed in here so you can see the condition of the bowl before we start sanding. Little bit of tear out right here, but you know, that should sand out very easily. This is really clean all up in here. Again, a little bit of tear out right here on the camera. But you know, when you're working with spalted woods, a lot of times this is what you end up with. So because, you know, they're starting to rot, and you know, sometimes you got grain that's really, really hard to cut clean, like here. But overall, the condition of the surface is really good for sandpaper right now. Couple of seconds in these spots and it's all gone. You can see some tool marks, and literally like a second or two with the 60 grit, and they're all gone. So that's not a concern at all. Anyway, sanding next. For this bowl, I only went to 320 because there's no resin. My normal sanding methods for straight wood pieces like this are from 60 to 320. Yeah, you could go higher, but again, I just don't see the point in it, to be perfectly honest with you. Save your money on the sandpaper, put that back in your pocket. My intention is to burn the rim here. So in order to do that, I want to clean this all up first. And then the unfortunate thing is, in order to burn this rim, you got to make sure that the sanding on it is actually really nice, because after you burn it, if it's, say, only sanded to 60 grit or 120, you'll actually see the sanding marks even in the burning, unless you leave it on there a lot longer than you probably should. So I'm just going to break that edge with some 320, and then we'll get to burning. All right, so I know that I've done one of these before on the channel, but we're going to burn the rim on this. Now I'm going to use propane torch to do so. I've kind of blown all the dust away, anything that's going to catch on fire away from the lathe. And the important thing when you're doing this is to make sure that the torch is always straight on to the wood. If it's a little off, either way, you're going to burn the inside or the outside of the bowl. But as long as the torch stays straight on, you shouldn't have any issues. Shouldn't. So yes, there is a risk of fire here. So it is important to clean up around your lathe. And you know, this is a more natural way of darkening the rim instead of using, say, a stain. There, we'll just let that cool down a little bit. I'll be right back. So after it's burnt, then I'll take some 320 and just go over predominantly where the natural edge is to make sure to get rid of any little scorching that may have happened when the torch wasn't presented exactly perfectly to the wood, straight onto the wood. And of course, we're using the Waterlux gloss here again. One of the important things to do is do the inside of the bowl, the outside of the bowl, and the rim last, because of course, all that charred material will get transferred to the rag. And if you touch that rag onto the surface of the wood, you're going to stain it. And you don't want to do that. Well, there you go. It's a pretty decent example of spalted maple. A little bit of chatoyance there. Compression grain. It's so big it's hard to get on camera. Anyway, I've been doing this rim treatment for many, many years now, and I really like it. I like the contrast that it adds. Pencil line spalting up in this area. Can't go wrong with spalted maple. Right, we'll see you tomorrow for the second coat. Let me know what you think. All right, so it is the next day, and I thought that I would show kind of the condition after one coat of finish here. Now, it's funny, when I look in there, it looks like it's shiny, but it's not. It's actually quite matte. But it's a good base layer to build on. So that's what that one looks like. Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite dry. Let me get the other one. And this maple, you wouldn't even know that you put finish on it. Like, it's just looks really 100%, just like you had maybe mineral oil on it. That's how much that has absorbed. This is soft maple. Again, sorry about the lighting. Try and get this. This is soft maple, so I mean, it's going to eat a ton of finish. Anyway, I'll buff this one and I'll show putting the finish on, and then I'll just show you the other one afterwards. So again, this is mostly for the new people, using Triple E buffing compound, as in Triple E the city, and then we're going to clean this up with some denatured alcohol to remove any residue before the next coat of finish. All right, here is your second coat of Waterlux gloss. So we're going to apply the second coat the same as the first coat, do the inside and the outside, and then the rim last. And then with each coat, you'll see less and less black material on the rag. And I find that typically after 3 coats finish, it's good to go from there. Well, that's definitely a lot better. It's for sure going to take 3 coats. This soft maple is really going to soak up the finish. But other than walnut and cherry, spalted maple, that's probably pretty close to being number 3, I would say. Nice chatoyance there. And what do you think about the black rim? You can't even really see it all that much. There it is there. Nice spalting. All right, I'm just going to do the walnut one off camera. Be back in a second. And there's the walnut one. Yeah, definitely a lot better with the second coat. There are little planets that are in there. Very translucent looking through it this way. I mean, it's, yeah, very. Now we're going to have to see how this behaves. I've been noticing kind of orange peely effect with just straight walnut with the water lux. So we'll have to see how that goes tomorrow. Anyway, I will show tomorrow what this is going to look like. You know, and maybe we'll even do the third coat. But anyway, so far so good. It looks nice right now. We'll see if it stays that way. See you tomorrow. All right, so it is the next day, and I wanted to show this to you because, you know, I've been having this issue with water lux in walnut for whatever reason. And if you really look down in here, I don't want to call it orange peel. I'm really hoping the camera picks that up. Yeah, you can see it there. I only ever seem to have this reaction with walnut, and it doesn't happen when the walnut's been cast. It's only when it's just straight up walnut. So I don't really know. I've been dealing with this now for, this is about my 3rd or 4th bowl. I don't do a lot of bowls anymore for customers because, you know, creating content for YouTube is all consuming. But I think that what I'm going to do instead of buffing this time is I'm going to use the 6.0 steel wool and kind of cut the surface back and try and get rid of this orange peely look. I know that using 4.0 steel wool on walnut, especially on the lathe, sometimes you'll get it embedded in the pores, so that's risky. But and maybe let me buff it and then we'll have a look at it. And if it seems to have really leveled the surface of the finish, then we'll proceed. If it hasn't, then we'll switch to the steel wool and see what it looks like after that. Or maybe steel wool first and buffing. I don't know. I just want to really kind of sort this out. And I don't know if you guys are going to... Yeah, I think you can see it there. So that's the walnut one, and I'll show you the difference between it and the maple. Now, while the maple is drier, it doesn't really have that orange peely texture to it. And again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to really show it to you. See how better it is? Now this of course is a more closed grain wood than walnut is. Walnut's actually pretty porous. And that could be just the issue right there. But there is a noticeable difference in the maple, birch, cherry. I typically don't see this with those woods, only in walnut. Anyway, let's throw the walnut one on there and see what we're dealing with. I'll try buffing it first. So, I mean, I've seen examples of Waterlux being used on walnut floors and it looks fantastic and it doesn't have any of these issues. So, you know, it could be a number of things. It could be a reaction with the triple E, could be a reaction with the denatured alcohol. I'm just not really all that sure. But after cleaning with the denatured alcohol, I'll show you the condition of the surface now. All right, I find it's even more prominent after buffing. Tilt this up again here. It looks really orange peely now. It's very hard to describe. It's not real bad on the end grain. It's only on the side grain where I'm seeing that it's a major issue. But again, you know, it may be just the pores of the wood that are just, I don't know. It's a strange thing. But if you put a coat of finish over top of this, well, it's not going to matter because the finish technically isn't leveled. So it's just going to build onto it and build onto it and make it look worse. All right, so I'm going to throw this back on. We'll use a 6.0 steel wool, possibly 4.0 steel wool, and we'll go from there. See what it looks like after that. Brand new pad. So going back to using 4.0 steel wool with walnut, I mean, this can happen with any porous wood. But in the past, I've had a number of issues with steel wool with the walnut. So that's why I usually don't use it. But there are 2 coats on this already. So I'm thinking that it's probably not going to be an issue. So that's why I'm using it this time around. And yes, you can get 6.0 steel wool instead of 4.0 steel wool. And then when I was done with that, what I did was I just took the buffing pad with some triple E and did the areas that, I don't know, like this finish is a very hard finish. And sometimes it's really hard to cut back, which, I mean, this is what you want in a finish. So, you know, by buffing it, that'll help smooth things out. Hopefully. All right, well, you can't argue with the results. There's that finish sitting on the bottom is perfectly flat, no orange peel. Let's hope it dries like that. She's a beauty. All right, see you tomorrow when we're doing the bottoms. So I'm finally happy with the finish. So I've got the piece mounted on the vacuum chuck. I'm going to do this bowl in the other bowl. So while you're watching me do this, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate it. Special shout out to the members. You guys are awesome. Thank you much. Thank you so much for your support. The bottoms of these were sanded to 320. Again, no need to go any higher than that. Let's have a last little chat about these 2 beautiful bowls and let me know what you think in the comments. All right, well, that's going to do it for the video. I'm going to quickly finish this up. Video's way too long. Anyway, you can't go wrong with spalted maple. We'll put up some rotating footage here at the end. Really like the contrasting look of the burnt rim with the maple. It's always been one of my favorites. Here is the very bottom. And as per normal, there's no finish on it because it's Thursday and I'm running out of time. I should mention the size on this is 13.5 inches at its widest dimension and 4.25 inches tall. And it's about my typical 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch thickness thereabouts. This is sold. Now our beautiful black walnut. As you can see, the finish looks really nice on it. I'm glad that I could figure that out. I think the key to it is almost stripping it right back and not letting that finish build up. If you let that finish, the Waterlux build up, then you're going to see this kind of ripply orange peely effect. But anyway, as you can see, that's gone and it looks quite nice. This will look quite nice when it's lit up at the end too. Little globes, purple sand cherry branches, epoxy. Very cool. And of course, with walnut being the king, it's you can't go wrong with that, now can you? Now, this is going to be a wedding anniversary gift. And I don't think that they know that this is happening, so I'm going to show the details here in the very bottom, and whenever I can I will personalize pieces like this on the bottom for weddings and anniversaries and retirement gifts, you name it. But anyway, this is a pretty large bowl. This is 13 inches across at its widest dimension, 6 inches tall, and it's my typical 1/2 inch in thickness. Again, when this is lit up at the end, should be really, really cool. And one that I did off camera, I wasn't going to show, but you know, I don't want to pack it up and take it with me. And I will show you what has happened here. And again, this is going to be very hard to see, but there is a crack along here that was filled in. And you know, I don't even know if the camera is going to pick that up or not. That's how small it is. And this is, of course, a soapstone inlay, which I've done a number of times on the channel here. Here is the very bottom. And this is a large bowl too. This is 13.5 inches across, 5.5 inches tall. And once you get down past the thick rim here, it's my typical 1/2 inch in thickness. Anyway, this is for sale. And I will tell you the price. I think that this is worth every bit of 300 bucks. And the only reason why I'm selling it for $300 is because it's got that crack in it. But you know, it's a shame to not see this be used. I mean, this would make a fantastic salad bowl, and I would not be concerned about that crack opening up. It's not going to happen. Well, it shouldn't happen. So anyway, let me know if you're interested in that. And of course, that's plus shipping, and those are in Canadian funds. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next giveaway at 135,000 subscribers when we get there. And of course, by commenting down below, you'll also be entered into my giveaway at 135,000, and I will ship worldwide. Unfortunately for the epoxy giveaway, it's only for continental USA and Canada. So next week is going to be a processing video. I got a bunch of wood that I've got to process to move with us. So that's going to be maybe even the next 2 weeks. It's going to be a processing video. So I haven't fired the chainsaw in a while, so I'm pretty excited about that. All right, well, that's it. Hopefully the video wasn't too long for you. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And hey, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, do that as well. That way we can give some more free stuff away. Yeah, so thank you for that. All right, have yourself a great weekend. See you next week.